Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Today in the rLounge, we've got a story where family values really meant value your family's access to your bank account. Because nothing says, till death do us part, quite like your wife secretly funding her sister's dream wedding with your house savings and then calling you the selfish one. Wife let her mom drain our savings for a family wedding, so I divorced her and left them broke. I'm still processing everything that's happened over the past few months, but I need to get this off my chest. My wife, 30 female, and I, 32 male, had been married for 4 years, together for 7. We weren't perfect, but I thought we had a solid relationship built on trust and shared goals. One of those goals was buying our first home together. We'd been saving aggressively for 3 years and had accumulated about $50,000 for a down payment. Everything changed when I was paying our monthly bills. I noticed a $5,000 withdrawal from our joint savings account that I hadn't made. At first, I thought it might be fraud, so I called my wife to see if she knew anything about it. She casually mentioned that she'd given the money to her mom for her sister Carly's wedding preparations. She brushed it off, saying it was just a loan, and that her mom would pay us back after the wedding. I asked her to come home so we could discuss it properly. When she arrived, I pulled up our bank statements and discovered that this wasn't the first withdrawal. Over the past 3 months, she'd been steadily transferring money to her mother in smaller amounts that I hadn't noticed. The total was already at $15,000. When I confronted her about this, she got defensive. She said it was for family and that family comes first. She accused me of being selfish about her sister's wedding. According to her, I wouldn't understand because in her family, they help each other. Her mom had raised them alone and sacrificed everything, so at least they could do was give her daughter the wedding she deserved. I was floored. Apparently, I wasn't considered family enough to be consulted about her own money. Then she stormed out of her mom's house. While she was gone, I decided to check our other accounts and financial apps. That's when I found another $8,000 transferred to her mother through Venmo and Cash App over the same period. The total was now $23,000, almost half of our house savings gone without my knowledge or consent. When she returned the next day, instead of apologizing, she doubled down. She said her mom needed the help for venue deposits and asked what she was supposed to do, let her sister's dream wedding fall apart? When I suggested she could have talked to me first so we could have discussed a reasonable amount to contribute, she rolled her eyes and said I would have said no. When I pointed out that she had essentially lied to me, she claimed she didn't lie, but just didn't tell me right away. A few days later, I agreed to meet with my mother-in-law under the pretense of discussing wedding plans. I wanted to understand exactly what was happening with our money. She brought a binder full of wedding ideas and vendor quotes. She casually mentioned they still need about $10,000 for the venue deposit, as if she was telling me about the weather. She said the place Carly wanted booked up fast, so they needed to secure it that week. When I expressed concern about the amount, she dismissed it completely, saying my wife understands the importance of family obligations and that they've always taken care of each other. The implication was clear. I was an outsider who didn't understand family values. I left that meeting with a sick feeling in my stomach. The next day, my wife came home with a detailed list of family expenses her mother expected us to cover for the wedding. It included $4,000 for flowers, $6,000 for catering, and $3,500 for the wedding dress. The total additional contribution expected was over $20,000 on top of what had already been taken. When I told her that this was insane and that we couldn't afford it because it was our house down payment, she said we could save for a house anytime, but her sister only gets married once. That's right, she slept on the couch, acting like I was the villain. A few days later, I was using our shared laptop when I noticed the bank website was still logged in. On a hunch, I checked the login history and discovered something disturbing. My mother-in-law's email address was listed as having access to our account multiple times. My wife had given her mother direct access to view our savings. When I told her about this invasion of privacy, she shrugged it off, saying her mom was just helping her keep track of the wedding expenses and it was easier if she could check the balance herself. She thought I was overreacting and that her mom was just trying to help the plan. Later, my wife announced at dinner that we were expected to host and pay for the rehearsal dinner. The estimated cost, another $7,000. Her mother had already told everyone we were doing this without asking me first. She explained that it was tradition for the groom's family to pay for the rehearsal dinner, but since his parents weren't well off, her mom thought we should step up since we have the money. I reminded her that we don't actually have the money. We have savings for our future that's being systematically drained for someone else's wedding. The next day, I went to the bank and opened a separate personal account, transferring my portion of the remaining savings, about $27,000. My wife discovered this almost immediately through a notification on her banking app. She called me screaming that I was being financially abusive and controlling. According to her, separating my money from our joint account was a betrayal of our marriage. I pointed out that she'd secretly been giving away our savings for months, but she insisted it was different because it was for family. I reminded her that I was supposed to be her family too, or at least I thought I was. A few days later, my mother-in-law showed up at our house unannounced, bringing Carly with her. They sat at our kitchen table and spread out a folder of receipts and contracts. My mother-in-law announced that they needed to discuss the wedding budget, revealing they'd already booked several vendors using our names as guarantors. The total was about $45,000, covering everything from venue to honeymoon. When I said we never agreed to pay for any of this, she claimed my wife had assured her I was on board. My wife avoided looking at me and mumbled that she thought we could work it out. After they left, my wife gave me an ultimatum: either transfer the money back to our joint account, or she would tell everyone I was trying to ruin her sister's wedding. I told her to go ahead and tell them the truth, that she'd been stealing from our future to fund a wedding we couldn't afford. The next day, I decided to check my credit report, just to be safe. That's when I discovered my wife had opened a new credit card in our joint names with a $20,000 limit. The card already had $12,000 charged to it for various wedding expenses. She had forged my signature on the application. She claimed she was going to tell me when the time was right. She thought I was being dramatic and said we could pay it off slowly. Then I received a text message from my brother-in-law, Carly's fiance, thanking me for generously funding their honeymoon. This was the first I'd heard about paying for their honeymoon. When I showed my wife the message, she looked embarrassed and admitted her mom thought it would be a nice gift from us. I reminded her there was no us in any of these decisions. She and her mother were making them without me. I contacted the credit card company to dispute the charges and freeze the account. My wife received an automatic notification about this and completely lost it. She grabbed armfuls of my clothes and threw them out on our front lawn, screaming that I was ruining everything. My mother-in-law had sent a group text to the entire extended family claiming I was sabotaging the wedding and breaking promises. A few days later, my wife returned home with her mother and sister in tow. They cornered me in our living room for what felt like an intervention. My mother-in-law started by saying my wife was devastated by the lack of support for her family. When I pointed out that they had been systematically draining our savings without my consent, my sister-in-law chimed in and that she deserved her dream wedding and everyone else in the family was contributing. My mother-in-law coldly said that no one likes a miser. It implied that my wife had married beneath her, but at least expected me to be generous. I started recording this conversation on my phone. They immediately changed their tone, but I kept recording as they tried to guilt and manipulate me into honoring my commitment to the family. After they left, I checked our joint account again and discovered my wife attempting to transfer our remaining funds, about $5,200, to her personal account. I immediately called the bank and had the account frozen. When she realized what I'd done, she exploded, saying I ruined everything, and her mom would have to cancel vendors now. She said I would never be welcome in the family again. I told her that based on what I'd seen, that would be a blessing. I made an appointment with a financial advisor to discuss protecting my assets and began researching divorce attorneys. I moved all my important documents to a secure location, a lockbox at a different bank, just in case. I filed for divorce the next day, citing financial infidelity and irreconcilable differences. While my wife was at her mother's house, where she'd been staying more and more frequently, I packed essential belongings and moved into a temporary apartment. I left her a note explaining that I'd filed for divorce and would communicate through proper channels from now on. At our first divorce hearing, my wife demanded 70% of our remaining assets, claiming she had sacrificed her career for our relationship. This was completely untrue. She had been employed full-time throughout our marriage and actually earned slightly more than I did. Her attorney suggested that the wedding expenses should be considered joint marital expenses since they were for family obligations. My attorney presented the evidence of financial infidelity, unauthorized credit applications, and the recorded intimidation attempt. I never imagined my marriage would end like this. Update. It's been about a month since my original post and a lot has happened. First, thank you to everyone who commented and sent messages of support. I was honestly surprised by how many people have dealt with similar situations with in-laws. The divorce proceedings have been moving forward, and during the financial discovery process, we uncovered something I suspected but couldn't prove before. My wife had been funneling money to her family for years, not just for the wedding. The total amount she secretly transferred to her mother over the past 24 months exceeded $40,000. This includes money that was supposedly for family emergencies, loans that were never repaid, and various gifts and expenses that I was never consulted about. What's even more shocking is what we discovered about my mother-in-law's financial situation. She's been living way beyond her means for years, using my wife as her personal ATM. She drives a luxury SUV, takes expensive vacations, and lives in a house she can't afford. She's actually facing foreclosure and has been for months, which explains the sudden urgency to extract as much money from us as possible before the divorce. My wife attempted what I can only describe as a pathetic reconciliation attempt last week. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, not crying or apologetic, but with a spreadsheet of her family's financial needs for the next 6 months. She actually said, "I think we can work through our issues if you understand how much my family needs financial stability right now." I just stared at her for a solid minute before asking her to leave. She didn't even mention love or our relationship. It was purely about access to money. My mother-in-law convinced my wife to cash out her retirement account, $32,000, to pay for her sister's wedding. My wife is now facing early withdrawal penalties and taxes that will cost her thousands. She apparently didn't even consider the financial implications because Mom said it was the right thing to do. In an unexpected twist, my sister-in-law's fiance broke off their engagement last week. Apparently he had been told that I was covering all wedding expenses as a gift to them, and when he learned the truth about where the money was coming from and the deception involved, he wanted no part of it. The fallout has been dramatic. My mother-in-law was forced to sell her luxury SUV to cover some immediate debts. She's been blaming me in a family group chat that someone, probably my ex's cousin who always thought the mother was toxic, added me to. My wife's credit score has plummeted after multiple unpaid vendor bills for the canceled wedding started going to collections. She texted me begging for a loan to fix the mess her mom created, still not taking responsibility for her own role in this disaster. I didn't even respond. The court ordered a financial separation and equitable division of our remaining assets last week. Because of the documented financial misconduct, my wife received significantly less than she expected. Her attorney actually withdrew from the case when she insisted on continuing to lie about the unauthorized transfers despite the clear paper trail. The divorce was finalized faster than expected due to my wife's continued financial misconduct during the separation period. She received only her personal belongings and 30% of the remaining joint assets after accounting for her unauthorized withdrawals. I'm still dealing with the emotional aftermath of all this, but financially, I'm recovering. I've closed all joint accounts, removed my ex from every financial connection we shared, and am rebuilding my savings. The house we were saving for will take longer now, but at least I know my money is actually going toward my future, not being siphoned away by someone else's family. What so bothers me is how easily my ex-wife chose her mother over our marriage. 7 years together, and she didn't hesitate to lie, steal, and manipulate to please her mom. The amount of gaslighting you endured is unreal. Every time you tried to talk sense into her, she twisted it into being selfish or controlling when she was literally robbing you blind. She wasn't even subtle about it. Giving her mother access to your savings account? Forging your signature for a credit card? That's not helping family. That's fraud. Her trying to guilt trip you into paying for the rehearsal dinner and honeymoon is just icing on the cake. And that reconciliation attempt, coming back not with an apology but a spreadsheet of her family's needs. What? And she had the gall to call you financially abusive? Nah, that's classic guilty conscience projection. What's the craziest way you've seen helping family go too far? Share your stories with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time. And please put your chair back where you found it.